How can just one law totally redefine what family means for a whole country? Well, today, we're going to find out. We're diving deep into a single, really powerful piece of legislation, South Africa's Civil Union Act of 2006. We're going straight to the source material to see exactly how it was put together, what it really accomplished, and, why it's still so incredibly important today. All right, so first up, we're looking at the official coat of arms of South Africa. And this isn't just some fancy logo, right? This is the state's official seal of approval. It's a really powerful way to start because it reminds us that the law we're about to get into is a formal, binding act, one that was designed to change the lives of every single citizen.
So you might be wondering, why was this law even necessary in the first place? Well, it all goes back to a promise. A really big promise, made in South Africa's new post-apartheid constitution. And that promise basically shone a huge spotlight on this massive gap between the nation's amazing new ideals and its really outdated laws.
And here it is. This is the exact wording that really drove this entire story. This one single clause from the Constitution says it loud and clear. Everyone is equal. But the thing is, back in the early 2000s, the day-to-day laws of the country, they just hadn't caught up with this incredibly powerful promise. So this was the fundamental conflict, right? On one hand, you have the supreme law of the land guaranteeing equality for everyone, including on the basis of sexual orientation. But on the other hand, the actual family laws, things like the Marriage Act, only recognized unions between a man and a woman. It was a direct legal contradiction, plain and simple.
So how did Parliament go about fixing this contradiction? Well, their answer was Act Number 17 of 2006, and it introduced a brand new legal concept to the country, the civil union.
Okay, let's look at the definition itself, and this is pulled right from Section 1 of the Act. The key phrase, the absolute game changer, is two persons, not a man and a woman. And it also locks in all the core principles you'd expect from any marriage. It has to be voluntary, between adults, and of course, exclusive.
And this is where the Act gets really innovative. See, it didn't just create one new status. It actually gave couples a choice. Section 11 of the Act says the couple themselves gets to decide if their union will be called a marriage or a civil partnership. Legally, they're identical. The consequences are exactly the same. But the name? That's totally up to them.
Okay, so that covers the what. But how does this actually work in practice? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of how you actually formalize one of these unions.
The requirements are actually pretty straightforward. Both of you have to be over 18, and this is a big one. Neither of you can already be in a marriage or another civil union. And, if you were married before, you have to bring the official paperwork, like a divorce decree or a death certificate, to prove that the previous union is legally over. All right, this brings us to one of the most talked about, most debated parts of the entire act. What happens if a state-appointed marriage officer has a personal objection to solemnizing a union, specifically for a same-sex couple? And the answer, according to the law as it was written, is yes. Section 6 has what's often called a conscience clause. Now, this was a huge point of debate when the law was being created. It was basically a legislative compromise, trying to balance the right to equality with the rights to freedom of conscience, religion, and belief. But even though it was meant to be a balance, its real-world impact was a major concern for rights advocates.
But look, despite that clause, the main goal of this act was always equality. So let's get to the section that gives the civil union its real teeth, the part that makes sure this isn't some kind of separate but equal situation. This is the crucial part. The language you're seeing here from Section 13, it might look simple, but it is incredibly powerful. This is the legal heart of the entire act. It says, flat out, that every single legal consequence of a marriage now applies to a civil union, period. Full stop.
So what does that actually mean in the real world? Well, it created this massive ripple effect across the entire legal system. Suddenly, any law in the country that mentioned the word marriage, we're talking taxes, inheritance, medical decisions, you name it, now automatically included civil unions. Anytime a law said husband, wife, or spouse, it now included a civil union partner. It was amazing. One sentence achieved complete legal equality. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second and put this act into its proper historical context. What was the ultimate impact of all this? The act officially went into effect on November 30th, 2006, and this is huge. This made South Africa the very first country in all of Africa,
and only the 5th in the entire world at that time to legally recognize same-sex marriage. That put it right at the forefront of this huge global conversation about equality.
So the big takeaway here is this. The Civil Union Act was basically the bridge that finally connected that constitutional promise of equality with people's actual lived reality. It created the legal structure that gave the relationships of same-sex couples the full recognition and protection of the state.
And that leaves us with a final question to think about. I mean, there's no doubt this act was a landmark for equality, a massive step forward. But with parts like that conscience clause, it was also clearly a product of compromise. So, how should history remember it? As a perfect solution, or as a crucial, maybe imperfect step on a much longer journey? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.